The satellites from the expansion are kind of the thing I wanted the buildings from the base game to be. Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the Artemis Project and its expansion, Satellites and Commanders. There'll be a link to this Kickstarter down below. That should be launching soon, or already, depending on when you're watching this video. And this is a split review. We're going to be covering the base game, all the things there, as well as the expansion and prototype, by the way. Everything for the expansion is prototype, rules, components, all that stuff subject to change. Timestamps down below to any relevant section so you can jump in wherever you want, especially if you already have the base game and don't care at all about what I have to say about it. So, let's go ahead and dive into this. The Artemis Project is a game that takes place across 6 rounds as you're going to be trying to, well, earn as many victory points as possible. You're navigating the depths, you're trying to get the resources, the energy, the materials you need, you're building buildings, you're gathering more workers, you're going on expeditions, you're doing all that to earn as many points as possible across the 6 rounds. This is a dice placement game. Every single round you're going to start with an event phase, you're going to go ahead and reveal this event, looking at what it says, Tentacles from the Deep. The player with the most dice in the events and the quarry combined lose 1 colonist of their choice when we get to phase B over here. So you're going to have an event marker which will trigger where that event goes, a little bit of flavor text if you want it, and then an effect that will affect all players, although some more than others depending on the board state. From there you're going to go ahead and roll your dice. All players will roll their dice, and you're going to start going through a dice placement of trying to figure out how to place your dice across the various zones on the board. To that end, let's go through the areas one at a time. We're set up for 3 players here, sort of, so I'm just rolling. That's a whole lot of 6s. This player is not necessarily lucky. The thing about this game is that high dice are not necessarily better. The good news is you have toolkits to modify the dice as needed. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through these zones over here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, going through those one at a time, starting with A, and you place your dice whenever you want, but you can choose the various zones. A is where you can go on expeditions. When you go on an expedition, you commit a die. This is where having high numbers is good, because you're going to go ahead and be able to commit your dice to these expeditions in order to get the bonuses, the rewards from the expedition. All the expeditions will determine how many resources are put out at the beginning of the round. They're also, if the number of dice that go there total or add up to the total over here, then you're going to get expedition rewards. And yes, if you're the only player, you could go ahead and get both of those. So you're going here, you're trying to get there. Let's explain the placement first and then come back to what you're doing past that. Over here, in this zone over here, you're going to be trying to go for energy. So I can go ahead and put down a 3 over there, let's say, and we'll go ahead over here, same idea. Let's have the other player, let's go in turn order so we can do this over here. We'll go ahead and take that, we'll put that there. Then we'll have this player over here, back to here. You're going to go to this zone over here where you can try to bid for buildings. We'll explain more about how that works shortly. Let's just go through a few more placements so that all makes sense. We're going to go over here with this number over here. We're going to go over here with a, let's go ahead and just lock that in over there. That'll be helpful. And then we'll go back down here. So we're going to put this down. We're going to go ahead and take this 2, and we're going to slide it in there. In this zone, and this zone, when you place dice, you place lower numbers before higher numbers. If you're placing the same value, then you put them behind them. The people who go first will have first access, but they get fewer things. Over here, we're going to choose where to go, and we're going to go ahead and just be competitive back there, taking that 1 energy, knocking that out. Over here, we're going to take this 6 and lock in the expedition, so we'll get that expedition bonus. We'll grab this 2 over here, and we'll put it behind this to get some materials. Still can be helpful. There's plenty of materials over here, so we see that. We also see the 2s are mostly gone. We're going to go ahead and lock in, you know what, on all 6 materials. We're going to try to cash in on a whole bunch of materials right now. From here, we're going to place this down over here on that zone. We're going to place this one down over, let's go ahead and lock in this building for the low cost of 2. Then we're placing this one over here. Nope, any place. Let's outbid that player on that building. And then we'll place this. That's a terrible spot to put it. Let's go ahead and place this over here. So let's go ahead and resolve the various areas as we go through it. And in general, well, let's just go through it. So, in the expeditions, any players who accomplish an expedition, the player who got the most will choose one of these bonuses, as well as getting one of these tokens, which will be worth points at the end of the game. So you're going to choose one of the bonuses, you'll get that token over there, you'll get points, and then the other player gets the other option, and as well as the token. Any other players get nothing. Over here, on this mod over here, you're going to go ahead and get energy. So you'll take energy from this region over here, but you take energy equal to your die value. So you're going to be taking 1 energy over here, because that's 1, going to purple, 2 to the next player, and then 6 over to the next player, which there actually are 6. So he can take the full advantage of taking that absolute ton of that energy to his zone over there. He did well. Over here we have the same idea. We have 2 to purple. We have 2 to orange, and then we have 6, but there's only 5 left to purple again. So as you can see, when you go to these spots, lower numbers get you first access, higher numbers potentially get you more things. Over here we have bidding for buildings. All players will buy the buildings they have using materials, and you'll have to pay the amount of your die. So when I outbid this player over here, I get that building, but I do get to go ahead and spend, well, not get to go ahead, I have to spend 4 materials to do so. So I'll return that to supply in order to build the building, and you can go ahead and put people on those buildings. Well, we'll go through that as soon as we have a chance. You're going to get the building, great. Any players who don't get anything when you go to a zone, and any zone wherever you don't get a single thing, you do have the opportunity to move up on this track over here in order to get the various rewards. So you're going to slowly move up, getting toolkits, getting energy, getting materials, getting a person, and finally getting a point. And when you get to the end of the track, you're done. But it's a nice little compensating factor for getting nothing in the game. At this zone over here, and the other players can pay 5 or 2 materials respectively to build their buildings. Over here you have the opportunity to recruit new people. People are useful both for placing out your dies in expedition, as well as being useful to staff your variety of buildings. This shuttle bay lets us move people around the board, but you have to have it staffed with one of these little blue guys over here. And same basic idea. You have to pay energy costs in order to get the energy. It's 2 energy per person, and you could buy as many people from the supply as your number. So orange gets first dib. Let's pretend they have 4 energy. They'll pay their 4 energy in, and they'll take 2 people, and they'll take whatever people they want, putting them in their shelters if necessary, or directly into buildings. And then purple can buy the remaining 3, paying 6 energy. I only have 4, so I'll go ahead and spend that and take both those blue people, putting 1 into my shelter and 1 into my building. Over here at 6, you'll have the opportunity, when you go to 6, you should have gone ahead and taken a person and put him there, but when you go to 6, you take a person with it, and you have the opportunity to upgrade that person into a 2, 3, or 4, these 3 options over here, depending on the die value you placed, and those are the core aspects of the game. The core placement zones. The last spot over here is where you can place toolkits. You can place a person, a die, to immediately gain a toolkit, and toolkits can go ahead and use your toolkits to modify your dice up or down by 1, which can be very helpful. And that's what you're doing as far as this engine goes. You're placing down dice, you're being mindful of the turn order of the selection, you're trying to go on expeditions, you're trying to gain buildings which will build up your tableau, you're trying to gain resources to pay for the variety of things you need, basically repeating that cycle across 6 rounds. A few other things to note: the buildings will give you all these extra benefits on them, assuming they're fully staffed at the end of each round. You go through a selection at the end of the round where you can move a person around and then activate any full buildings. The shuttle bay allows me to move 2 more people around than what I can normally do, which gives me a lot more flexibility to activate my buildings. In rounds 1, 2, and 3, you'll be activating these buildings, which give you a lot of tableau building stuff. And then in rounds 4, 5, and 6, we get new building types that give you more point-based scoring. Different opportunities to load these up and get different points, as opposed to more of your, resources and tableau stuff. You're starting to build towards that end game. You're going to go through that cycle for 6 rounds, and that's basically what's going on in the Artemis Project. So, let's talk about what I like, don't like, all the usual review stuff. And again, reminder, all the satellites and commander stuff, timestamps down below to jump to those, or we can just slowly get up to it. Ease of play. The game is very quick and easy to dive into. It's a standard worker placement or dice placement game. A few rules as far as the specific zones and how they activate. Rulebook is fairly short, easy game to teach, easy game to jump into. Plays in roughly an hour to 90 minutes or so, 60 to 90 minutes, and table space is minimal. This is a small board. You have the other players having their things over here, the little zones, and that's basically it. Also worth noting, these satellites here, that's part of the expansion review. We'll come to those shortly. As far as player count, this is a 1 to 5 player game. I've played this at 1, 2, and 3 players. The solo mode basically involves you taking extra dice from other players and rolling them for before and after your placement. It's a fun little puzzle, and it's great for learning the game. It's not my preferred player mode. I do enjoy the solo mode, but it's not my go-to solo game. 2 and 3 were definitely better, but I would say 3 was my favorite player count, giving you a higher degree of interaction in these zones you're going in. 2 is a little bit less interaction. I haven't played at 4 and 5, so I can't comment on that. I imagine 4 would still be pretty good. 5, I think it would slow down the game and not necessarily add the interaction, just based on how much I enjoyed 3. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Interaction is strong in this game. This is not a game where you're doing your own thing. This is a game where you're being incredibly mindful of the dice other players have, the toolkits they have, and how they're going to get in the way and try to take the things that you want. You want those expedition rewards. You want those specific buildings. You want the giant chunks of resources. And there's a little bit of a push your luck element there of higher dice will get you more stuff, but not if other players have taken those stuff before you. And so trying to be mindful of the turn order, but the mindful of turn order also has a double-edged sword, because if you place the same value as someone else, the person who got there first has an advantage. All these spots are hotly contested in different ways, and they all factor into what you're trying to do. And the relief track is a nice little extra for if you don't get something, you do get something else from the relief track, although it caps out once you hit the end. So if you don't get something too many times, the game's just like, hey, you're not good at the game, so it is what it is. The expeditions and rewards of them are a lot of fun. Going through these expeditions, getting those rewards, getting those second place, being the only person to get an expedition. If someone leaves you stranded and you have to go ahead and knock out an expedition yourself, if we can actually turn that to a 6 over there, it's not bad because you get extra things for it. The toolkits give you the options to manipulate and adjust your dice, and the game in general is mean. The game has that element of trying to be cutthroat in what you're doing. This is not a light, fun game. It gives that appearance, but it's a lot of mean placement, and they have the buildings that give you a little bit of a tableau element, different rewards in the buildings, get toolkits every round, get extra energy, extra materials, extra stuff across the board from those buildings as you slowly build up your tableau. Ultimately, the core aspect of this game is it's a tight dice placement game that has a lot of interaction in terms of being mindful of what other players are doing and placing your dice accordingly and trying to not be outplayed by the other players across the rounds of play. As far as what I don't like, two things. One, the rewards for getting nothing in the game is not nearly as good as what you may have committed towards it. So while you might get two toolkits or 2 energy, sometimes that reward can be a bit punishing, especially as you move up that track. If you do find yourself having a bad game, the game's kind of like, well, you got to the end, and it is what it is. I almost wish that once you got to the end, you can just choose any reward whenever you got punished there. You could argue that there's opportunities to manipulate that in your favor, but it just seems a little punishing if you're having a bad game or if you're having other players take too many spots from you. So I like the fact that you get something. I feel it could be a bit more over there. Also, I don't like the fixed number of rounds. This is more of a game concept for me in general. I am not as much of a fan when a game gives you a fixed number of rounds, in this case 6 rounds of play. I start going into the math of, is this action worth it? Is this, how much will I get done? It's fine, but I almost wish the game were more player determined in terms of where it ended, as opposed to being, here you go, you have 6 number of rounds, and that's great. I do like the fact that the buildings switch midway through. That kind of shifts the way you have the tableau, in terms of counting up your tableau, counting up what the return is on something. Having the building shift halfway through the game gives you a nice little edge there. As far as what I can see others not liking, the core cycle of the game is fairly simplistic. It's all about the expeditions and the buildings for your tableau, and everything else is kind of just supporting that. Everything else is just trying to give you the stuff you need to get those extra points. Expeditions are worth points. The buildings, especially the later phase of buildings, are worth points. Everything else is just about that. Get the resources so you can pay for the people, so you can pay for the buildings. The cycle is just basically place your dice, operate, execute on those, and just rinse and repeat across 6 rounds of play. Additionally, the game is mean. While that is a pro for me, this is not a game where you can walk into it expecting to not have your actions not work out in your favor. You're going to be placing dice. You're going to be trying to get things. Other players will swoop in with a little bit of a, you're going to have your 6 there and someone else will swoop in there with a, hey, thanks so much. I'm going to pop in there with a 4 and take 4 of the 5 resources. Your 6 is good for a single resource. And then the worst part is, if you get a single resource, you don't even get the benefit of going up on the relief track. So a single resource can actually be worse than 2 sometimes, depending on how that's structured. So it's a mean game. You have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to place dice and you will not always get what you want. And then lastly, the random nature of the events and the random nature of your dice. There's mitigation across the dice. The events are kind of equal, but if you're really not such a fan of randomness, this game has a decent amount of randomness of how it will play out. As far as not final thoughts, because we're going to be covering the expansion shortly, so my not final thoughts and rating on the Artemis Project is, it's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. I like what the game is doing in a lot of ways, but it also feels, I mean, this is a 2019 game that kind of feels like it's just about putting together a bunch of elements that work well together, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it does anything amazingly innovative. It does a good job, it has tight placement, it does things I've seen before, but it wraps it all together in a nice package of a game that works well. It doesn't wow me in any particular ways, but it also doesn't have anything I don't really like. It just feels like a good, well-designed game that does a good job of being what it's trying to be. A mean, short, accessible, tight, dice placement game. Again, good job without wowing me. As far as the expansion, satellites and commanders. Let's talk about what this expansion adds, and again, reminder, prototype for all these things. So, first of all, we have a bunch of events that are often related to some of the new mechanics. We have a bunch of buildings. We have a bunch of, stage 1 and stage 2 buildings that are added to the game. So those are all things there. We also have more expeditions to go on. So another stack of expeditions to go on. We have this overlay track, which is going to be relevant for one of the new mechanics as you place this overlay over that spot on the board, because it's going to be relevant for training people up. Because one of the 2 new things is, shockingly enough, given the title here, commanders. Commanders are going to be a new type of resource or person that you can upgrade your people into in terms of being able to get these commanders, which are basically wild. They're wild in terms of what they do. They also can be assigned to your dice in order to add 2 to the pips, which can be incredibly impactful. Tossing this on your die over here, so it's still the first in line, but is now a 4, letting you take more resources. It adds to the meanness of the game, but it also adds to the strategy of the game. Additionally, commanders get free movements to pop around from various zones at the end of each round, so commanders are just basically wildly powerful people that will help you in a variety of ways. You do have to train up to get them, but there's more training spots to get them, so you'll see those in play. You won't get a ton of them throughout the game, but they're basically a super powerful person on your board that feels super powerful, and you can take a lot of advantage of them. And then we have the other main component here is satellites. Satellites are going to be these 4 things around the edges over here. There's a giant stack of them. You're not limited to specific ones that you're going to have a whole bunch of them structured around the edge of the board. And during the course of the game, a new placement zone you have is these satellites over here. When you take a satellite, you're going to assign a die to a satellite. So whatever you roll, you're going to assign that die over there. And then you're going to turn a satellite die in. So you'll grab a satellite die, again, prototype, I don't know exactly how these are going to play out in the final game, but you're basically going to put the satellite onto an unoccupied satellite as you wander across the board, and then in the resolution phase, your satellites are going to go clockwise around the board, activating in the spot that they're at, activating based on the strength of your satellite, and then pipping up one, well, you're going to pip up the satellite die, you're going to pip the satellite die up one as you move slowly around the board, and the next round move it around the board. The downside, the upside of getting higher values on the dice is you're doing things at a higher activation level. The downside of having your dice slowly move up is in order to take control of someone else's satellite, which you can do, you basically have to put a lower number in play, knocking their satellite back to them. So it still has that meanness aspect of lower numbers can be beneficial, but where do you put your lower number? Do you put it down over here to collect resources? Do you knock someone else's satellite out? If you roll high, you're going on expeditions. There's all these different trade-offs as far as what you can do, but you'll be knocking people's satellites off, or eventually they'll just hit 6 and come off themselves, but they're giving you activations around the building. Just to give you 2 of them from over here, we have Resource Scrounger. Gain materials or energy in any combination from the supply equal to your SDV, your satellite die value. You must have at least 1 die in these zones in order to get them. So this can give you 3, 4, 5, 6 resources depending on how high your satellite dice is, which is great for an activation that you placed last round and is slowly cycling around the board, operating as a little miniature tableau generator. Then we have the Afterbid over here, which is a really fun one. I really like the Afterbid. The Afterbid allows you to bid on a building after the bidding, after it was bid on. Over here, you can use your satellite to bid on a building. If it must win the bid using the usual rules, and resolving, you pay 2 less. So you can say, oh, by the way, this 5 over here, I just want to see what you all would do on these buildings, but now that you went for the volcanic extractor, I'm actually going to go ahead and pay this 5 to bid this building. I'm going to pay 3 instead of 5, and I get to take it. You get to see the entire resolution. The satellites are game-changing. The satellites, to me, the commanders are a nice little thing. The satellites are absolutely game-changing, and we're drifting into opinion here, so let's talk about the expansion, what it adds, and how I like it. I like the commanders. The commanders are nice. They're a good little twist to the game. They give you something extra to do. They make you feel powerful when you use them. You have to train to get them, so you have to work towards them. I like them, but they don't break the game in any meaningful way to me. They are solid. I like them. The satellites for me is where it's at. You have a 3-player game where you're popping around satellites, moving around the board, and just activating on those zones. Because of the fact that other players have satellites in play, depending on who you're playing with and how cutthroat you're going to be, sometimes you're trying really heavily to knock other people's satellites out of the sky. Other times you're saying, hey, you do you on your satellite, I'm going to go ahead and pop my own satellite into play in order to start cycling the board and getting these benefits. And it can be incredibly satisfying to have your satellites crack off their SDV value in order to go ahead and get the specific bonus you want, and the bonuses are absolutely game-breaking in terms of what they do. And so I really like the satellites. The satellites to me are, like I said in the beginning, this is what I wanted the buildings to be. The buildings are nice, they give you nice little things going on, but it doesn't feel overly meaningful or impactful. The satellites do. The satellites are the most fun of this entire engine to me, and the fact that they're variable as well adds a degree of variability to the game that, again, I didn't get as much from the buildings because the buildings are, I mean, they are variable, but they just feel like more of the same stuff going on over here, versus these feel like fun little mini games attached to your actual game. So I really like the satellites expansion over here. Well, the satellites and commanders expansion, but the satellites part of the expansion. As far as final thoughts, this time actually final thoughts, I really like what the expansion adds, particularly the satellites, as I said already. This one bumps the game up to a 4 to 5 for me. I really like I could say it again, I've said it 3 times. I really like what the satellites bring to the table here. I like the commanders, it's a nice little thing. I like the extra cars, the extra variety. For me, though, the satellites add an extra dimension, an extra element to this game that really takes the Artemis Project up a notch for me. Hope you found this video helpful or enjoyed this review or all that. I'll throw a link down to the Kickstarter down below. As far as other game recommendations, I have 3 this time. First of all, Alien Frontiers. If you're looking for another dice placement game that also has a degree of knocking people out, of taking their zones, of using the various dice combinations in order to get what you want, Alien Frontiers set in space will give you a solid degree of dice placement. It's been a well-rated, well-loved game for a long time, and for good reason. Additionally, if you want an escalation in terms of the game weight of how complicated a game is, while still giving you that dice placement and the degree of taking the moves away from people and getting in front of them, that similar element of lower dice having both benefits and downsides to them, I highly recommend Coimbra. Fantastic game that uses a similar placement engine that works really well. And then lastly, if you like dice placement and you want a little less of the competitive cutthroat aspect and just more of the fun placing your dice, Rajas of the Ganges is an excellent dice placement game that is a lot less pushing people out of their spots and a lot more just getting fun things for all the placements you have. It's still a solid strategic game, just less bumping people out of their spots. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.